Yeah. Hey,
Hey,
welcome to the
welcome
SCIF.
back. Welcome back. We are back with the SCIF here. It's Thursday night, 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And tonight we're going to change things up a little bit. Chris and I are going to talk about, all this talk lately about what's going on in selection and how they have destroyed selection and how they've destroyed the Q course. Chris and I are going to talk about what it was like in our experiences going through. Chris and I don't know, I'm not going to say we're unique. It took Chris and I, each one of us, twice to get through selection for different reasons, and we're going to talk about some of that tonight. What one of the things that is unique is we see a lot of the command and the media reporting that the command is saying that some of these new recruits, or the female recruit, which we've already established what happened and what they did, and how they basically eliminated all standards, and how they completely changed selection and the Q course in order to lower the standard to get more applicants through and to get women through, which was really the goal. But with all of that, we were reading reports here that she excelled, and we already established what happened in selection. She didn't excel. She basically failed every aspect of it. But nobody excels, or traditionally, in this. This is one of the hardest things physically and mentally just about anybody could do. It was definitely one of the hardest things physically and mentally I've ever done. And that's probably what strikes a chord with guys who've done this, because this is a big part of what your identity is. And when you basically take all that you did and you make a mockery of it, and you just destroyed it, and you destroyed this achievement, it rubs people a little bit in the wrong way. But I can tell you, at any one of these selections, I don't care if it was SF selection and qualification, if it was SEALs with BUDS, if it was MARSOC, if it was Air Force Pararescue, if it was going through, it used to be called RIP and Rope, but now I think it's called RASP and something else for Ranger Battalion. Nobody excels. These programs were designed to break you, okay? They were designed to break all but a very few who could endure. That's what separates the people who got into these units. They're able to endure most things that most people just simply couldn't or wouldn't. And that's why it hurts so bad to see the whole community just absolutely being destroyed for political correctness, and not just political correctness, but to basically destroy the military. What it's all about. I think Chris is having some technical difficulty over there.
Yeah.
Are you up? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. But with that, we're going to talk about our selection. We'll start off with selection, then we'll move on to Q course at some different date. But we're going to talk about our selection experiences and what happened, and go from there. So without further ado, Chris, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I'm going to touch on something real quick before you go on there, because selection is not something, like you mentioned, you excel at. So it had a little nickname when I went through, and I really never heard it since. But the SFAS stands for Special Forces Assessment and Selection. Okay? Assessment and selection, not excel and select you. No, that's never a thing. Okay? So with that said, the what it was called, well, what it was nicknamed was School for Advanced Suffering. Okay, so there you don't excel, you endure suffering for 3 weeks. That's exactly what I did. Like I said, like you said, we went twice, and it's if you don't suffer there, then the cadre is not doing something right, or the standards were lower. That's just, I mean, it's just plain and simple. So
yeah, well, you're 100% correct. And here's another thing we need to clear up: selection is just selection. That is not the Q course. You have to get through selection to be qualified to go on through the qualification course. And the qualification course is where you end up going to PLDC BNOC. You end up going to you go to and learn your MOS. You traditionally learned your language. You would go to SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, level C, which is the worst. This isn't like regular SEER. This is SEER on steroids. We can talk about that a little bit later and what that is and what we can share. And then you go through Robin Sage, where you put everything together, and it's an operation, huge operation. Traditionally run in the Piedmont. They run it in other places, but the Piedmont, North Carolina. And it's based on a fictional country called Pinelandia, right? Pineland, right? And they get local law enforcement, local civilians that all play along, and they bring in your G's, people that you're going to be working with, and trying to move things by, with, and through. And it's set up to be a very elaborate scenario where you've taken all the skills you've learned over your time in the Q course. And the Q course, selection's 3 weeks. The Q course traditionally pushed out to about 2 years. If you're a Delta, it pushed out to almost 3 years, because Deltas, they can essentially do surgery when they're not licensed to do surgery in the United States, but Deltas basically can do surgery at the end of the Q course. Oftentimes overseas in these small third world villages, they're the dentist, they're the doctor, they're the surgeon, right? And on the team, they're the doctor. So yeah. It's a very, very long and traditionally it has been. And we sort of went through what they had done to destroy selection and what they had done to destroy the Q course all along the way. So Chris and I are going to talk about it a little bit tonight, and talk about selection, just what selection was, that 3 weeks that led up to it. I have a little bit longer story. I was in a program called SOPC, which was previously referred to as SF Babies, the SF Baby program, although I was in my early 30s when I went through. So I'm going to discuss that a little bit, and we'll go from there. So, Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So 3 weeks long. You get to do a lot of stuff in those 3 weeks. You do a ton of, actually, you just walk everywhere. You can run if you want. Some people run. There's most of the time you just walk as fast as you can everywhere with a
ruck.
With your ruck, aka a large backpack, and you carry enough food and water in there. And the minimum was, I think, 60 pounds. So I think for 60 pounds,
I never had a ruck that weighed 60 pounds, ever. Not when you add water and everything else. I never, throughout the whole SOPC EQ course, ever had a ruck that weighed 60. It was always, my minimum would probably be about 75 pounds.
Yeah, when you add your food and water in there, you're well over the 60-pound mark. So everybody was always adjusting their stuff. And at any given time, the cadre could stop and weigh your rucksack. So I did see that happen. It did happen to me. So anything, whatever the poundage was that you fell below, you're basically kicked out at that point. And so that was an honor violation at that point. So that was huge. So you always kept your ruck over that.
Chris, describe what an honor violation is, because we talked about that as far as being a roadkill in the STAR course. What's an honor violation?
Okay, so there's pretty much a code of conduct for the selection course. So whatever the cadre puts up. So here's one of the other facets to this. So you're not really taking any information from the cadre per se, which is basically the people in charge of you. So they will put time hacks and stuff on different locations on chalkboards or whatever they're writing on that day. So you'd have to send people out to look at it, see what time and where you had to be, what what time you had to be there, uh, what uniform you had to be in, and basically if it was the rucksack, which was generally was, make sure it was within standard weight standards. So then once that time hack was met, everybody would be out there and ready to go. But here's the thing: once, if anything that they put forth in the beginning is violated, that means you read it. Anything at all during those 3 weeks, if you read it um, and you violated that, that was an honor violation because you knew about it and you deliberately made a choice not to follow those directions. So you're basically an honor violation, and you basically got kicked out at that point. You'd be lucky to get a return for an honor violation, because that's one of the biggest things that we've, and Matt, you and I went through this with a dude on on the team, and he was lying to me, so I got rid of him. He lied to me. He lied to a bunch of other people on the team, and you can't deal with that when you're dealing with people's lives, and especially when you're asking somebody to back you up. So honor violation's huge, but that's pretty much the start right there. But you definitely had to have the weight on your rucksack, because that's really, and then you start going with the rucking and movements and stuff like that. They got long, they got continuous, and they got rough. So
and in selection, your ruck is the lightest it's ever going to be as an SF. As you progress on through the Q course, if you get to the Q course, and after that, it is the lightest it's ever going to be, and it gets far heavier than 70 pounds. Okay.
Yeah. That's true, because when you start thinking about at that point you're not carrying any ammo, you're not carrying any
commo gear,
yeah, medical stuff. I mean, there's some medical stuff, but not a lot. But when you start adding all that stuff,
nothing.
Yeah, nothing mission related. So that would be anything with commo, ammo, demo, medical stuff, any of that would be mission related. And your food too, food and water, again, on top of all that. So yeah, you're starting to approach on the 100-pound mark at that point. So yeah, that's really the start. So once everybody gets their uniforms sewn up and things like that, and gets a number, that's really kind of the start, getting all that stuff packed. And there are certain ways to pack it. And I think, man, it's been a long time, but I'm remembering, I think we had like a packing class. Did you have that?
No, we had that. We had that when I was in SOPSI. We had a packing class, and they'd dump everything back out, and smoke you and do all the things they would do. But,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that we had the cadre at that. One of the first couple of days out there was like, hey, try, this is what we suggest, but you can pretty much do whatever you want to after that, as long as you carry it and you make all the movements, you'll be fine. So what did you do the first week? Selection
the first week we processed in, we did the PT test, okay, which was the first, that sends everybody home that can't not meet the standard. You've got to max the standard. So it's not, they did this gender neutral PT test that they've gone to, and still 85% women are failing us. But it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And the thing is, everybody would say, well, as long as they met the standard. Well, the PT standard, depending on what age you were, when you went to the Q course, you were judged on the 17 to 21 age category. So it didn't matter if you were 30 years old. It didn't matter if you were, 22 years old. When you went through selection, SOPSI, the Q course, you were graded on the 17 to 21 age category. And the age, you had to do a certain number of push-ups to max, certain number of sit-ups to max, certain time for the 2 mile. and the PT test is really basic, but what it does is it eliminates people who aren't going to, people, you got to do pull-ups. There's a whole list of things that you had to do. At one stage, there was a certain bench press, and they were playing around with that. Now they're doing something else. But the PT test is just basic. And if you don't score, the 300 in the Army is the max for the PT test. But if you're not scoring solid upper 280s to 300, you have no business being there, or you didn't have any business being there. And that was the male 17 to 21 category. So that was, in order to max that, you had to do like a 13-minute 2-mile. You had to do, I think, 82 push-ups in 2 minutes, and you had to do 86 sit-ups. I don't remember. It was something along those lines. But, I mean, if you weren't getting above a 285 to a 300, you had no business being there. And they eliminated people for that. That was the first thing they do. And then they had timed events. So you had the 5-mile ruck. You had, there was some other timed events as far as, I think there was another run that was a timed event. It's more sort of the administrative basic stuff is what they mostly got out of the first week. And I think you did Nasty Nick the first week to the obstacle course, which was, it's primarily rope obstacles, and some are very, very high, but you are climbing rope and climbing rope and climbing rope, and that is all you do, and it breaks a lot of people off. It also, there are some places there where you can get injured as well, and they push the claustrophobia type stuff with people, and there's some things that you start to get. The Nasty Nick is, it's a mile long, and it's one rope exercise after another. So you can't climb ropes. I mean, when I say climb ropes, you need to climb, okay? Get your body up above, a 40-foot rope and move on. It's just one of those after another. Boom, 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 boom. And it's really pushing your body strength. And it's so, one of the things that I found so unique about the Q course is you'd never judge a book by its cover. Never do that, because there were some small guys there that could hump at a ruck approaching 200 pounds and do all of it, and you would never guess just by looking. And it's all because we get back to that endure. It's a mindset more than anything else. Yes, you've got to be in shape and you've got to be ready to go. But yeah, Phil, running for 2 miles. Damn. Yeah. So it's one of those things that they start to play with you and start to get you up on elevation. And if you fall, you're going to get hurt bad in the Nasty Nick. If you fall on any of these height obstacles or anything along those lines, there's really not a whole lot of safety. You wear a helmet when you're doing it, but it's like a bicycle helmet, a glorified skateboarder's helmet, something like that. But that's what we did the first week. Got all of that. I think we took the ASVAB. They decide what your language proficiency was the first week. And here's a question, Phil. Did everybody learn a different language? It was based on the ASVAB. And the best way I can talk about this is it, I say ASVAB. What was it called? The D-Lab? What was the language test called?
Yeah, the D-Lab.
The D-Lab, yeah. Yep. The D-Lab was this. It was a made-up language, and it had chapters, okay? And what you would learn, you would be given this language. They put you in a big classroom. You'd be given this language that's completely made up, and it would have a certain set of rules in the first chapter. So you would have to learn those rules in the first chapter, and then you move on to chapter 2. And in chapter 2, you can't go back to chapter 1, but you have to remember those rules and build upon them in chapter 2. And then you move on to 3 and 4. And I remember when I went to selection, I had in my mind, I wanted to go to 10th Group. 10th Group did JSETs over in Europe, and they were based out of Fort Carson, Colorado. And I wanted to be a Bravo, which is a weapons guy on the team, because I was always big into guns. And so I wanted to do well on the D-Lab, but I didn't want I really didn't want to get Arabic or any of that. So when I took it, I tried to do well. If you do poorly on it, you're going to get a level 1 language. So the level 1 languages, the popular ones were French, Spanish, Tagalog, Indonesian, I think was a level 1 language. I don't know if they had level 2 languages because I think, or maybe German was considered a level 2 language. And then they jumped up to level 3s, and level 3s were Farsi, Korean was a level 3. Those are the only ones I can think of.
Yeah, did you Arabic?
Say
Mention
that
Arabic.
again. Yeah,
Arabic.
and then no, Arabic's level 4. So you jump to Arabic, and Mandarin Chinese were level 4 languages. And so if you did well on this D lab, they're going to put you in either Arabic or they're going to put you in Chinese. You kind of knew what group you were going to end up going to depending on what language you got. So if you got Spanish, you were going to go to 7th group. If you got French, you were going to go to 3rd group. If you got Arabic, you're going to 5th group. If you got Mandarin Chinese, Korean, Tagalog, you're going to 1st group. That's how it worked. Now there was some crossover with Arabic and French between 3rd and 5th group. So there was a need. Those were the 2 at the time most utilized groups. If you got Russian, which was a level 3 language, if you got Russian or German, you were going to 10th group.
10th group.
Yep. So they did that, and they started the psychological batteries, because you go through a lot of the psychological batteries. One of the first they do, most basic, was the Minnesota Wonderlic. But they did a bunch of stuff. And believe it or not, a lot of people got phased out because you would write answers down, and people would just put goofy shit. But I guess that's how they figured this stuff out. And I remember a guy said to me, there was a question, Chris, and you probably had the same question. It was, do you ever see random animals that other people don't see? Right? It was something, I'm paraphrasing. It's not the exact question, okay? But it was a question along those lines, and I'm paraphrasing. And this guy kept on getting called back, who was in my tent, okay? Because you get divided into groups. So he was in my tent. And I'm like, well, how did you answer that? Because he was telling me that's where they kept on calling him up for this stupid question. And he says, well, here's what he said. Do you ever drive down the road and you're with your buddy and you said, did you see that elk? And he didn't see the elk, but you saw the elk. So I put yes. I'm like, I said, you're shitting me, right? You're not serious, right? So what do you mean? I'm like, okay, dude. So it's things like that. I mean, it sounds silly and stupid. It gets far more in depth than that. But
yeah,
they that's what they got out the first week. The second week is when the STAR course started. STAR course that starts to separate a lot of people, and this is unfortunately what they couldn't get her past it, so they basically eliminated it. So hold on there. The Minnesota Wonderlic. Yeah, it's a pretty famous psychological evaluation that they're still using today. That's just one of them. There's a bunch of batteries, but I remember the Minnesota Wonderlic was one of them. You sit and fill out a lot of paperwork, a lot of it.
Yeah, isn't that thing like 500 questions?
Yeah.
Like, and here's what it repeats. And it repeats after like the first 250 or something. So you got to watch it because it's the same question, just in a different. It's typed differently, and you got to look at it and you're like, what the heck? I thought I just answered this like 2 hours ago, because it takes you so long to complete it, right? And if you're not thinking, here again, this is when you think about this. When you enter this selection thing, you initially sign up. You're going to take all these battery tests, but you're always first and foremost being evaluated every second that you're there. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You're watched every second you're there, how you respond to stuff, how you take pain, how you take orders, how
Mm-hmm.
you apply all of that to what you're doing at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned before the cadre just they're seen, but they're watching everything and they know
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Now these guys are guys that have been in group for a while, and they don't want some douchebag coming to their team and getting them killed. So
Mm-hmm.
you're evaluated the whole time you're there.
Well, and here's what else they did first week is this is where they take you over. They have this big pit filled with rubber. And these were some of the things, because I mentioned SOPSI. I'll talk about that prior to this. SOPSI prepped me for selection, but they take you over and you do log PT at this stage. And then they start really beating the shit out of you. They not physically, but they're not beating you up, but now they're starting with the log PT and the runs, and they're smoking you, and they're making you do all of these exercises that are designed to hurt and cause distress and push you past your physical strength and your cardiovascular ability, and all at the same time. And then they're up in your face, and they're starting to really ratchet things up. And this came towards the end of the first week. And this is where you're put into groups, and your group is on the log. And you see when the people start breaking off because they can't carry their log. And if they can't carry their part of the log, things start to go downhill really fast. And he'll collapse, but he can collapse the whole group that are on the log. So when people start collapsing, they can't get the logs up. And the logs are just one of many that they're doing. It's just one that is very easy to visualize. That's when they start really hammering everybody. So everybody on that log, when one guy can't, pull his weight on it, uh, they start punishing everybody on that log, and they start doing all sorts of shit. And then you got to get back up on the log, and then this is when people start quitting. And when people start quitting, the logs become heavier because you have less people pushing up the logs, and it goes on and on and on like that. Um, they're doing that there. They're also doing combatives at different times too. You're doing basically World War II type combatives. They call them lines training. And you're beating the shit out of each other that way. And they're evaluating you. They're watching you. How are you learning? How are you putting your effort into it? Things like this. But these things right now is where they're starting to ratchet things up and starting to make things very, very painful and very, very uncomfortable. They give you they have a board out there, and you would have to go out and look at the board, and then everybody would have to follow what was said or put out on the board. So you might have to be called into a formation at 2 a.m. You might get called you're not going to sleep when you're there. You're always on edge trying to figure out what the hell's going on, because you can't miss any of this stuff. When they put something out and you miss it, you're wrong. You are done. Right. So now they're starting all of this, and you're getting a lot of this all out of the way. So some of it's in the classroom where they're keeping you, and you're tired, you're miserable, you're hungry, right? Because you're just eating MREs, and you get very few of those. So they're starting to really push you. And then the second week is reserved for the STAR course. And the STAR course is truly unique to special forces. And even Delta, it's a version of the STAR course, one of the big deals. And the STAR course now, what makes the STAR course unique is you're in an area of North Carolina that's really like a jungle. It is so remote. It is so overgrown. I mean, thick, and there's lots of rivers and streams and lakes running through the area, and there's lots of hills. And when you have hills and you have water in the lowlands, you have draws. Okay, so now they give a quick class on land navigation, but if you don't know land navigation and you're not good at it before you get there, you're screwed. Okay, because now everything that they do isn't just physical and jammed in physically. It's the physical deal tied with a mental application, okay? And seeing how you can keep yourself calm and work your way through a problem that seems like it's almost unsolvable. almost hopeless, and that's the position they get you in. So in the STAR course, you're given a number of points. So you have to take out your topo map, you have to get out your compass, your protractor, and you got to start matching off your points. So the STAR course, you have to get 4 points in one night and you pass, okay, or 8 points throughout the 3 nights of the STAR course, okay. And these movements between points can be 30 kilometers long. You're in the woods, this thick stuff by yourself. You have to make decisions. Am I going to go all the way around this draw, which might make a 20-meter point into a 35, or 20-kilometer point into a 35-kilometer point, or do I try to bust this draw and go straight through it? But when you get into there, it's so thick it grabs on. You're carrying a rubber dummy, so it's a imitation of an M16 or an M4. It's rubber. You've got your ruck on it. You have a reflective deal that you've got on your rucksack. You can't use any flashlights. You can get under a poncho cover to do a map check and use a red light under it, but nobody can see it. If they see you doing that, you're done. So yeah, but there's full of poisonous snakes down there. You come across water moccasins, rattlesnakes, copperheads, black widows, brown recluse, you name it. And there's some other stuff out there, wild pigs. And a lot of people have never been in the woods by themselves, especially a severe woods like you're dealing with out there. And there'd be people that would get caught in these draws, Chris. And I'm sort of jumping ahead here a little bit. But you would hear people crying in the middle of these draws because they would get stuck in the middle of these things and don't know which way they're going because you get so turned around. They have these things out in North Carolina called wait a minute vines. Basically, they're like a big, thick, tangled rose bush. So they got these big, and they grab on, and you can't move. As you're trying to bust through this draw, it is just taking everything out of you. And it's so thick, and it never seems like it's going to end. It's miserable. It's absolutely miserable. If you ask somebody for help, if you come across somebody, or if somebody asks you for help and you answer, you're gone, right? And they have roads. There's dirt roads that run through the area. That's called running the roads. If you get caught running the roads, that's an honor violation. You're immediately booted, never to return. And from what we're hearing, a specific individual was caught running the roads twice. Didn't get all their points. And that's why they've sort of moved. They've now changed the STAR course where you don't have to get all your points anymore. So this is kind of it. In my personal experience, here's where my trouble started my first time through selection. Because my first night, I broke my ankle. I have heavy ruck. I stepped on a log it was mushy ground that I was walking on, and I stepped on a log that was halfway in there. With all that weight on my back, canked my ankle to the outside. I had a fracture in my ankle. It blew up the size of a freaking basketball. And they took me to the hospital called Womack back on Fort Bragg, and I missed the whole night, the first whole night of STAR course. They wanted me to drop. I didn't drop, and I refused to drop because there was no way. I joined the Army after 9/11. I was 33 when I was going through the Q course. And there was no way I was going to miss my opportunity. This is what I had done everything for. So I went back. They put me in an air cast, and I went back and could hardly walk. Learned to walk with it, and it was just a disaster. And finished the STAR course with 7 points because I missed the whole first night and I couldn't move quickly. So I finished the STAR course with 7 points. And I didn't meet the 8, but they give you a conditional, okay, under certain circumstances. Because I had broken my ankle, I missed the whole first night, they gave me a conditional. So you have to do everything else perfect throughout. And I had another incident in team week, a personality incident with an individual that caused me some issues. But the STAR course is one of these deals that if you get behind and you don't know how to terrain associate it, if you're just following, the movements are too long and too rough, okay, to be able just to shoot an azimuth and walk from point A to point B, you'll get off somewhere along the way because of the terrain and because of the distance. And they're all held at night. You're at night, so you're not during the day. It's all at night. And you've got to get yourself into a mode that you don't give a shit about anything. Spiders can be crawling on your face. You could be dealing with poisonous snakes. Water moccasins are all over the place. That's what you primarily dealt with. A few copperheads and things like that. But there were dudes that would roll in with a bunch of dead water moccasins on their ruck because they were killing them along the way as they're in water. These things in the springtime are very aggressive and they come after you. So you have to, with your rubber duck, deal with these things. So, and there's been a bunch of people. There was not a bunch, but there's been a few people that have been killed from poisonous snakes in the Q course. So, anyways, the STAR course is one of these things that you have to get yourself in a mode, and you have to realize you read your topo map. You got to learn what everything on that topo map means. So when you look at that map, you're seeing in your brain, in your mind's eye, you're seeing the terrain. So you're seeing the mountains, you're seeing the hills, you're seeing the draws, you're seeing the ridges, you're seeing the valleys, you're seeing all of that on that map. And what you do is you say, okay, you're going to go from point A to point B. So I'm going to run along this ridge line here, and I'm going to get to this draw. I know when I get to this draw, I'm within, 5 kilometers of my point. At that stage, I'm going to get my compass out, and I'm going to try to guide myself in. But you need to make the long distances by running from terrain feature to terrain feature. You better know what you're doing. You're going to get lost out in the middle of nowhere. And that's the STAR course. And that's one of the first big rites of passage in order to get through selection into the Q course. What's your experience with the STAR course, Chris?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. So I'm going to touch back real quick on some of this. So at this point, we've been physically just exhausted. So this makes me think back to what we've been talking about. So at this point, what we're talking about here is being physically exhausted already. And then you got to be out there in the middle of the night by yourself and making decisions. And this is an individual thing because you got to know the land nav very well to make your points and to make your time. So you're very, very, I just can't stress this enough. You're just physically beaten down by all of this, but you find the strength deep down to keep going. And it's hard for me to believe what we've been talking about, just hard for me to believe. But with that said, I got a little story about the STAR course. So you know how much I love land nav. I like it. I still I still practice MGRS stuff today. It's a lot of the stuff you and I do around with our courses and stuff like that. I usually get an MGRS map. So, and I keep studying on that stuff. And I like the system. So I studied a lot and I know it, and I've never really forgotten any of it. So I was pretty good at it. I passed everything the first time when it came to land nav after practicing. And I will compliment all the leaders that I had up until that point, the team leaders, the squad leaders, platoon sergeants I had up until I went to the Q course, always decided to teach me land nav for some reason. Man, I was thanking them so much on those dark nights, man. But this is what was cool about the STAR course for me. So I got to this draw one. Man, I don't know how long I've been walking from this other point. It had to have been hours. I got to the point and I'm looking around. I'm like, man, it should be right here somewhere, right? So I'm like, what the heck? I'm right at the edge of this draw. And I'm like, oh, man. I'm thinking to myself right now, the vines are in that draw. I got to get to the other side of this because I should be able to see it, but I don't. You know what I mean? One of those nights you're like, oh, man, yeah. I know it's right here. Well, get this. So I said, all right, man, you got to get in there. So I set an azimuth real quick. I said, I'm going to go in 50 meters on this azimuth. I'm going to turn around and come back out. If I don't see it in 50 meters, something's, and then I'm going to go into full panic mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try something else. Well, I started in this draw, dude. I got 25 meters in, and I seen a faint green light. Okay, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's because
wait,
at the points there's a man there, one of the tacks,
yeah,
and they're monitoring the point, and they have a little chem light that's out, and some of them are real sneaky about it, so you can't really
yeah,
see the chem light.
yeah.
Hmm.
I said I seen that faint green light, and I'm like, oh man, please God, tell me that is the point, right? So closer I got, it got brighter and brighter, and I'm like, yes, yes. Here was the cadre. He was in the prone, okay, laying there like on his back, just kind of chilling under a poncho, okay, that couldn't have been more than like 2 feet off the ground, with the chem light about 3 feet off the ground. So you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't see it from 25 meters away. So what's that
Yeah.
do? It just
Mm-hmm.
you just get a mind melt out of that, and you're like, ah! And so you start to, yeah, I mean, really, here and people, please trust me when I tell you, this is part of that mental game that plays with you. You as an individual have to make choices, and if you don't trust your own skills with the map reading, you don't trust in yourself out there, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. You gotta
Oh yeah.
trust it. You gotta trust in yourself, and you gotta start making your decisions makes, and it builds a lot of confidence. And
You absolutely do, and there's a whole
it's hard for me to
experience to all of
believe.
this. Yeah, there's a whole
Yeah,
experience because you think you're here, and then you realize you have to go through another draw. And this draw could be another 100 meters. You always
yeah.
know when the draw is coming because it starts to get cooler, and you start to head downhill, and you hear those whippoorwills. You know, you hear that, and you're like, "Oh my God, here we go!"
Oh,
And you're just smoked. You're like, I can either try to go around this draw or I think I can go through it. But you get turned around real fast. You can't see anything. You're literally busting through the thickest vegetation with those wait a minute vines that grab onto you. And it takes every ounce of effort to try to push your way through this thick stuff. And you might be doing that for hundreds of yards. And if you're not going the right direction, you can be going around in a circle inside this draw and think that you're just going to die in there. And this is why I said you would hear you'd hear grown men crying inside these freaking draws. And I can't explain it because there isn't anything, you know, I'm in Minnesota. Chris is here too in Minnesota right now. There's nothing up here that could replicate what one of those draws down there outside of Camp McCall are. There's just nothing, with the northern training area down there. It's just unreal how thick and vegetated these things are, filled with all sorts of nasty critters and everything else. But the star course is it's an experience, and like
yeah.
Chris said, if you aren't confident in yourself and what you're doing, you are going to fail at the star course. And if you fail the star course, you fail. I had 7 points. I didn't get my 8 points. I missed the first night, and I couldn't move quick enough because I had a broken ankle. Although the last night I could have gotten my 8th point, and I was within 50 meters of it and didn't see it when time ran out, because you have a time hack. You must get it by this time. And I didn't. And I thought I was done at that stage, and they allowed me to continue through the rest of the Q course. So go ahead, Chris.
What's fun, dude? So you start early and it's daylight.
Mm-hmm.
And you might
it's
get
evening. It's
yeah,
evening. Yeah.
it's evening. You might get 1 point you might get 1 point during the day, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is at night. Everything, the entire points that you got to get are all at night. And again, here's one of them psychological things that just messes with you, because I can't tell you how many spider webs I ran into when
Oh
Phil was
yeah.
talking about poisonous spiders
You
out
just
there.
don't
Dude, they
care.
were hitting me in
You
the
don't care.
face. You don't even care.
No.
You're like, yeah,
You're
whatever.
so
But
exhausted. You're so
yeah,
physically exhausted and mentally. You do not care. You
yeah.
don't have time.
But
No.
to answer for a caveat for that is, I did have one of the guys I was in section with did get bit by brown recluse, and he suffered. He was there for I think he went 3 days, and I'm like, dude, you have to get that checked out. He was, uh, we tried to cover for him and stuff like that, and we're like, dude, if you get sick, something physically is going to happen to you. He's like, I don't want to quit. We're like, dude, you're not quitting. You got this huge thing like this on your side, bro. It looks
You get
like
a
it's eating
necrosis.
away at
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
Throughout SOPSI and through the Q course, there was a lot of people that got hit with these things. And I
yeah,
remember in SOPSI, they were basically cutting it out, sans Novocaine, and stuffing it with gauze, and then putting you on an antibiotic. But with brown recluse, you get a necrosis because when they bite you, your skin starts to rot, kind of like getting bit by a rattlesnake, but not as severe as a rattlesnake. But a brown recluse, everybody reacts different to them. A black widow, you're going to get very, very sick, and it could become a life-threatening incident down there. And they're all over the place. And black widows, brown
yeah.
recluse, rattlesnakes, water moccasins. I you One portion of the Q course, and this was the second time I went through. I was in grass that was taller than I was, and I'm just hauling ass through this grass, and I felt something grab my foot, and like I said, I didn't pay attention and nothing. And in the sole, we used to put these special soles on. They were called the SOPSI sole. They were super light sole that you'd put on your military boots, and they would wear out fast. But it was a real good hack because every ounce on your feet is like what 5 pounds on your back, right?
Yeah, something.
So I felt something, and then when after I was done, when I was looking at my shoes, there was 2 puncture marks in the sole of my shoe. So
Oh
my
wow,
guess, it was
wow.
probably a copperhead is what it was, but I didn't give a I didn't, you don't care. You know what I mean? Oh, I was lucky. You don't care
You
because
don't
you're
care.
so mentally and physically spent. So that's the STAR course for all intents and purposes. And it's a big part of selection. And we can't do it justice talking about it, but it is a very big part. Here we go, Steve. How many guys are selected to start and how many end up getting on the SF team? That's a unique
That's
question because
yeah.
when I started SOPSI was you signed a contract and the Army got you for 5 years. Now, I was too old to get that contract. I happened to win one during basic. I won a contract doing a PT test. And SOPSI would get you for 5 years and they would teach you. So SOPSI was absolutely it was one of the most difficult portions, and you didn't even get to selection yet. SOPSI was prepping you for selection, and they had SOPSI 1, and then you would go to selection, then you would come back and you'd go to SOPSI 2, which was prepping you for the most difficult, well, not even arguably, the most difficult part of the Q course is phase 2. And they would prep you for that. And SOPSI was just so. I remember my class in SOPSI, 136 people got off the bus from airborne school after basic and AIT. And I'm going to say somewhere in the 30s graduated. Okay. That was SOPSI before you get to go to selection. Now, if you made it through SOPSI, they got in a lot of trouble and they had to move SOPSI out to Camp McCall because they were really putting the beat down on people in SOPSI. SOPSI was so bad. That's why they were so effective at getting people through selection. It was absolutely miserable, but you learned land navigation. You just got beat up in land navigation and smoked and land navigation, gig pits, land navigation, no sleep. Just do it all over again. Time to vent. It was miserable. I remember during an event in SOPSI, a timed event, where an individual who was he was an aspiring actor, and after 9/11, he decided he wanted to join the Army. And the guy was when you looked at him, he looked just like an average guy. He was about, it's my dog. He was about uh, I'm going to say 5'8", 5'9", maybe 5'10", maybe 165 pounds. This dude, you had to do a timed ruck run. Okay. So you had a 70-pound ruck on your back, and it was a 5-mile time deal. He averaged 7 something a mile with a 70 to 80 pound ruck on his his back. And this dude looked just like, that is a world-class athlete right there. That's why you never judge the book by its cover. Some of these dudes, you look at them, you're like, there's no freaking way. And they just surprise you one after another. But anyways, SOPSI was miserable. So you had, I think a few classes before me, they only had 12 people that graduated SOPSI. And then you go to selection. If you made it through SOPSI back then, you had an 80% chance of making it through selection, whereas the regular Army was less than, it was like 17% made it through. And it was kind of an unfair advantage because you'd already gotten your ass kicked, for over a month. And you learn land nav, and you just come out of basic and airborne and all of that. So some of these guys they would blow you away with what they could do physically, and a lot of the guys in the program mentally. But everybody just quit SOPSI. I mean, they quit and they went off to the needs of the Army. So they went to an airborne infantry unit is where they went because they were already airborne qualified. And they would get up there every morning after breakfast, and they had a big gong, and somebody stole the hammer for the gong, and they gave them a toilet brush. So everybody would be out there in formation, and they would line up, and they'd get up there. It's just not my time, guys. And they'd hit with the toilet brush that gong, and they would be sent off to the needs of the Army, wherever you were at. And then after, the people that were left there, they would smoke them before they sent you out to the northern training area to do PT until 3 a.m. And sometimes they'd leave you in the front leaning rest, and people aren't going to believe me when I say this. You'd be in the front leaning rest. That's the push-up position, okay, for 5 hours. And I'm not exaggerating. That is not an embellishment. That is not an exact. They would do stuff like this after they smoked the bag out of you. So SOPSI was absolutely miserable, but at the same time, it prepped you for selection. So to answer your question, it's a lot different now. Somebody told me they graduated 400 people in this last class. That is unheard of. Chris, have you ever heard of anything? What did we have in our graduating class?
I don't know what the numbers were, but it was very low. But when I went to selection, there was over 300 people that started, and at the end there was 70 people who got selected.
And that's selection. And that's
just the first step.
Yeah.
I didn't go. I was since I was regular Army already. I didn't go to SOPSI. So when I went back the second time, there was over 300, 310 or 320, somewhere in there, and 70 people got selected. And then that's just the start. Yeah.
Yeah, you start and then phase 2 is the biggest washout rate. Phase 2 is.
Hey, Philip wants to know what smoke them. You want to explain that a little bit?
Oh, smoking. Okay, yeah. And that was you can't smoke a quitter. That's the big saying in the Army, right? Smoking is where they come up with all sorts of very creative and cruel ways to physically punish somebody. So we had in SOPSI, we had 3 gig pits. One was about 1.5 feet deep of water, just shitty, dirty water, okay? And it had a deck over the top of it, and they'd stand up there with a hose, and you'd have to break the ice in the morning to get in that thing, okay? Because I went through, it was cold. And your video stopped, Chris, for some reason. You see that? Chris, are you there?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Yeah. Your video stopped.
I can't do anything on the video.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So anyways, so they would come up with creative ways. So they had 3 smoke pits, or gig pits is what they called them. And this is just an example of what that is. So they would start you off in the one that was 6 inches deep and full of mud and muck. And they'd start doing push-ups, then they'd start doing flutter kicks. You'd get on your back. And this is after you'd eaten breakfast, after you'd already done your morning event or your PT. You've eaten breakfast, you're cleaned up, you're getting ready to go out to the northern training area. And then they would find something, and then we'd take you down to the gig pit. They'd put you in the 6-inch one, and you'd be doing flutter kicks and push-ups and these things called Little Man in the Woods and Jojo the Duck and all sorts of things right in that gig pit. And then they had one that was all sand. So now you're all wet, and you're over rolling around in the sand doing all sorts of flutter kicks, push-ups, sit-ups, little man in the woods, whatever they come up with, right? Then they'd put you in the deep water. And like I said, if it was cold out, you had to break the ice to get in, and you had to get yourself up under the water, which really caused some issues with people that have issues with cold water. You're back there, Chris. And
Yep.
then they would make you put your head under, and they'd be spraying, and they'd pull you out again, and then they'd rush you. Now you've got sand all down your BDUs and in your shirt and everywhere. Your underwear, your socks, your boots, you're soaking wet. Now you're going to have to rush and get on the bus and go out to the northern training area and do land nav until 3, 4 in the morning. Be bussed back to get an hour's worth of sleep to start it all over again because you got another timed event in the morning. So the smoking is finding unique exercises to punish you with physically and mentally. I mean, they just pound you into the ground. That's called smoking.
Yeah, and most of that stuff is just bringing you to physical exhaustion before you do anything else. It seems like it's always there, but when you get that physically exhausted, your mind is really here's where the test is for you. So you have to separate that physical exhaustion because you still got to think about stuff that's going to happen. So you can be punished. You learn very quickly that you can take a ton of physical punishment and your brain still work at the same time, like doing stuff like you're thinking hours ahead and then sometimes minutes, sometimes days ahead of like stuff you got to do. So you just you disconnect. You find a point where you disconnect from the physical pain to concentrate on the mental toughness that you need and the mental capacity you need to go to the next event. And it might just be the land nav port. It might just be some sort of test, but like I said at the beginning, you're always being tested, always being evaluated at that point. So you learn very quickly where to disconnect, and the physical pain doesn't mean anything.
So this brings us to week 3 of selection. Week 3 of selection is other people do different things. The only other type of thing that I would know that would be comparable to this would be Hell Week during buds. Okay. From what I know of that. Okay. Team Week is going to break you after you've already gone through these other things. Okay. Team Week is no joke. Okay. So you get to Team Week, and what you're assigned a group of people that are your team, right? And you're simulating an ODA, Special Forces A team. Okay. So what Team Week is designed to do, Team Week is designed to give you a bunch of impossible exercises that you have to figure out a way as a team of getting through. Okay. And when I say impossible exercises, I'm going to give just a few examples. Okay. Because this is the physically most punishing portion of the Q course, and it's where it's designed to make people to start losing it. And this is when people start to get into skirmishes and disagreements and not working as a team. And if you get yourself to that point, you guys are going to fail, right? So for example, everything out there is sand. If it's a road, it's all sand, deep sand, right? So they'll give you a Jeep, right? And that Jeep will be missing its whole front wheel. Okay, so the front brakes are dragging in the dirt, right? And it may be missing some other items on it as well. And they'll say, you have, as a team, okay, here are some items you can use, right? And you've got your rucks on the whole time, right? Here are some items you can use, like bars and rope and things like that. Get this Jeep from point A, okay, 6 miles across into point B. By this time, go. And you have to figure it out, okay? You're like, how the hell are we going to push a Jeep deep sand 6 miles by this time, right? And this is where people start coming up with ideas, and you start to see some of these ideas are horrible. and you fail. Now you got to start a new idea. Then you come up with another idea and it fails because you've got to distribute the weight of that vehicle, right? And you've got to find the easiest way to be able to move it from point A to point B without destroying everybody on the team. So you would have to figure something out. Then they had this thing called the down pilot exercise. I don't know if some of these are the ones that you went through, Chris, when you went through, but
Yeah.
My first selection, I had a broken ankle and I had to do all of this stuff. So you have all of these events that you have to do and you have to figure your way through it. You just do it, right? So you, once you finish that event, there'll be cadre at the point, and if you meet the time hack, they give you another event where it's the same type of issue. So like the down pilot deal, so that we call it the Sandman, right? And they'd have these duffel bags stuffed full of sand that weigh about 200 pounds, and you'd have several of these damn things. And you would have to do that and then move these ammo cans that they had loaded with simulated ammo, but the damn things weighed, hundreds of pounds. And you had to figure out a way to get all of this stuff from point A to point B, and they would give you the same type of thing. Lashings, maybe one broken wheel that you might make a cart out of some way, or a piece of plywood that you could put the sandmen on top of, and then put the ropes on top of your rucks and go. You have X amount of time to get from that point to another point, and it just goes on and on and on. And sometimes you finish an exercise and they say, okay, now you're going to have to ruck to this point to get your next event, right? And this is where I got in a little bit of trouble. Did you do those same type of events, Chris, on yours? Because they come up with all new stuff that people do.
Yeah, I did. The down pilot we did.
Mm-hmm.
The ammo crates.
Yep.
I don't even know what was in them. We just carried them. Yeah, it didn't even matter.
Yeah.
You just moved it. And the contraptions, I did a few of those.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was pretty much. But you're just, like I said, man, you get exhausted from it. But
and
I
people
did the
start
sand
arguing.
babies.
And,
Yeah. Some of the same stuff. Yeah.
So where I got in trouble during this time. There was an individual on our team who was from Ranger Battalion, and he was trying out for selection. He'd been there before. I'm not going to name any names. I remember his name specifically. And he introduced himself to the team when we were put together for team week. And I told Chris this story before, but he said, look, I have steel plates in my back and in my neck, and I'll still smoke every single one of you guys. I mean, he'll still outperform every one of us no matter what, right? And everybody's looking at this guy like, what the hell? Here's a big part of, and this goes throughout the whole Q course. You go through a peer process. So every week you have to peer 2 people on your team that they give you, going through the whole Q course. And that's like, we don't want this guy on our team. This is the guy who's the poorest performer, da-da-da-da-da. And if you get peered, you heard us talking about getting peered in this last scenario with what we were, that was overruled. But if you get peered, you are removed. Even if you don't quit, even if you pass everything, you are removed and you are gone. Okay? Because you can't get along with other people. And part of being an SF guy is to be able to go overseas and make friends, because you're building your missions, right? You make friends with people that are far, far different than you. And if you're not a personable person, if you can't adapt to different cultures, if you can't find what motivates people and appeal to that, you will not be a good SF guy. And if you piss off your whole team and you're the guy that nobody likes, you're not going to be a good SF guy. So you peer 2 people every time and they're gone, right? So this individual, nobody liked, and kind of, I mean, he was a physical stud, but he just had he had the personality of a freaking toad, and he was just an asshole. Okay, so that's how he introduced himself. And we had a few run-ins. And one day I was leaving. It was like the third day of team week after events. And he said to me, he says, you ruck pretty good for having a broken ankle. Like I was making it up or some shit. I mean, I'd been to the hospital. They diagnosed what I had. It wasn't a severely broken ankle, but it was severely sprained, and I had stress fractures in my legs. So I had a broken ankle, and I wasn't going to quit. If my ankle was the size of a damn volleyball, what it was, and it was miserable. So, he's making these comments, which I shouldn't have cared about, but he was just trying to push buttons. So he pushed my buttons, and we were going out to formation, and I got up in his face, and everybody else like sort of split things up, saying, "Hey, don't even pay attention to that asshole," right? Everybody thought he was an asshole. So anyways, fast forward, we were in between events, and we were rucking to another location to receive another event, and we didn't have cadre with us at this time. Okay, they put somebody in charge, and the guy that they put in charge, I didn't really care for either. He was kind of one of these do-gooders that was super, super squared away, but he wasn't. He thought he was, right? Was not an SF guy. He was a brainwashed, inside the box, not outside the box thinking individual. So, and I don't have any proof that he's the one told, but we were rucking in two lines, and the roads are all washed away out there, and there's big divots and everything in it. So one side of the road was a little bit nicer than the other side of the road, and we were in two, they're called ranger forms, okay, two ranger lines.
Files.
Ranger file. And I wanted to switch over to the other side because of my ankle, and the last half of the Q course was absolute misery for me, this damn ankle, right? And then you ignore it to do what you have to do. I can't believe I put the all of the weight power through the rest of the star course and team week and the ruck, which we're going to talk about coming up here, the big trek. But I try to switch over to his side of the road, and he kind of blocked me in the line. And I try to get in front of him, and he sped up and blocked me again. And next thing, me and this dude are rolling in the ditch off to the side of the road, just going at it. And the whole team jumps up on, and they're pulling us all apart. And this sort of like broke out into a huge kind of brawl between me and him with our rucks on, rolling down in poison ivy and everything else down in the side of the road there. And I remember it was going up a hill. There's lots of hills out there. And everything calmed all down after that, but this went on for about 10 minutes. And me and this dude in this big fist fight and rolling around, and everybody else trying to get in between it and stop everything. Maybe it didn't go on that long. It seemed like it did. But anyways, we get to the next event, and we go and do the event. Well, somebody told on us, okay? Somebody in our own team told on us about what happened, even though nobody liked this guy. He was an asshole. He had it coming. Everybody was glad he had it coming, right? And everything just seemed like it was normal at that stage. So we went through and we completed team week. And at the end of team week, how many days was it? It was the whole week. It just event after event after event. Usually had 2 events a day. And they just broke you. I mean, just broke you. And it was the end of team week. And there's one big event that everybody knows that you have left, and you're broken off. Your feet are destroyed. You're just destroyed, physically, mentally. But the people who haven't quit are still there. Okay, so your class is much, much smaller at this stage because all sorts of people quit during team week. All sorts of people quit or get eliminated during the star, and all sorts of people quit the first week. So the class size is significantly smaller at this stage, and you have one more event that everybody knows about, but you're broken at this stage. And this event is it's a big long ruck, and you don't know how long it's going to be. Okay, and they come and get you in the middle of the night, at the end of team week. Okay, the first day you're done with team week, they come and get you, right? And they give you a briefing, and you start on this event. Now you know it's the last event, okay? But you don't know if it's going to be 20 miles. You don't know if it's going to be 40 miles, okay? But
Yep.
you are
Yep.
broken, and you have to make it, okay? And you have a time hack. You have to make it onto that time hack, right? So you start at night, and you just keep walking. It's not, you don't have to do anything mental except push yourself through this after you're hurt and everything else. And everybody's hurt at this stage. Everybody's hurt at somewhere. Nobody gets to that point and doesn't have anything wrong with them. Okay. Everybody's broken. And you keep rucking and you keep rucking. They line the road with chem lights. Is this what they did with you too, Chris?
Oh
They
yeah.
line the road with chem lights, and you just keep going and going. It's like doing the Baton Death March at this stage, right?
Yep.
And it's people are so close to being done, and they're just dropping. And people sit down. Some people fall asleep, and they're done. If they fall asleep, they get caught because there's cadre cruising up and down and pickup trucks, and everybody's just walking and walking and walking, and it turns. So you go through the whole mental process. Oh, we're turning back to camp. We're going to be done. And then you turn away. You know what I mean? Because you know which direction you're going, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to turn back. Oh, here we go. And then you turn away. And it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes until the morning. And then you finally get through and you think, holy smokes, I just made it through selection. I just made it through selection.
Yeah.
Okay. They stand everybody up, and everybody's there. They announce everybody who made it, and there's where you learn a term called the 21-day non-select. And this was my experience the first time I went through. Me and this other guy I got into it with were both 21-day non-selects. There was a whole group of people that never quit, did everything they were supposed to. They're just a 21-day non-select. And it is one of the most heartbreaking things you can imagine. I mean, absolutely. Because at that stage, I'd been through SOPSI 1. I'd been through basic AIT, airborne SOPSI 1, selection, broke my ankle in selection, continued on, finished selection. I missed one of the points, so I was a conditional. So I pretty much didn't have any other second chances, right? And me getting into it with this moron caused me to be a 21-day non-select. Now, he got a never to return because this was his second time going to selection as well. And it was my first time. And because I had the broken ankle, the sergeant major there sent me back and said, you're a med drop. He didn't call me a 21-day non-select, called me a med drop, even though I never dropped. I finished the whole selection. I was a 21-day non-select. And I was to heal and get ready to come back and do selection all over again, which I did. I didn't fool around the next time. Didn't get in fights with people. I finished the STAR course, all 4 points the first night. But believe me, you have to want it to go through selection twice. And I always do things the hard way. You have to want it. But there was just no way. Any part of the Q course, there was no way I was ever quitting anything. I was doing it, or it's going to kill me, and that's part of it. And that's why it stings so bad to see what they've done here in the last couple of years. That really is disheartening. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree with Matt that what they've done to this thing is just really like just kind of ripped the heart out of the whole thing. But everybody, probably anybody who's going to watch this video, kind of knows how allegedly tough Ranger school is, and Ranger Battalion and all that. That's cool and everything.
Ribs and
So
Rask. Yeah.
yeah. So I went to selection, and then throughout the Q course, Rangers did quit, for that matter. So it's not like you get a Ranger tab or whatever, and you think you're like this total badass or something, and you can come to special forces and just cruise through. It doesn't happen like that. So even some of the toughest dudes who get there, they just, this whole thing, as I mentioned before, the school for advanced suffering, it just breaks them off and they quit. I've seen grown men cry during this. I've seen people get bit by spiders during this. I've seen some of the toughest dudes that I knew, they quit during this. It's not always the toughest guys who make this. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that no way takes away from what the standard is. The standard is the standard. And that standard is our whole argument here. We feel like it's been totally lowered, and you make your own assumption on what we said here tonight. If you got any questions, um, me and Matt will be more than happy to set up a selection course for you, and then you can figure out what kind of what where your disconnect is for your mind and your brain from your body. Okay, just think about that. And
Well,
we'll be,
it's funny because Chris touched on a point here about some of the dudes that went down. When I talked about SOPSI, uh, that I the there's a bunch of guys who get off the bus, and I remember seeing a bunch of guys that looked like Randy Couture that got off the bus. Okay, and I was in shape, and but these guys looked like they just stepped out of the ring, and they have the first thing they do to introduce you at SOPSI. It's called a SOPSI party. And at SOPSI party is they immediately bust into these smoker runs that you just can't keep up. Then you come back and you do log PT. Then they're smoking people, and they have people running around doing JoJo the Duck and everything else. And at that day, all these people are going down as heat casualties. Okay, all of these people are going down as heat casualties, and it's those big dudes, those guys that you're looking at like, holy smokes, these guys are, you know what I mean? They're either roided out or whatever, but those were the guys that were the first to go down to a heat casualty because their bodies couldn't take everything that they were pushing them through. And that's why I'm saying you never judge a book by its cover. And when they start talking about the way they portray special operations guys in movies, they're saying the ideal Green Beret, SEAL, MARSOC, Marine is basically 5'11", about 185 pounds. Okay, because this is a mental game more than anything, and that's the ideal, to be able to carry the weight, to be an athlete. You got to be a multi-athlete. It's not just one thing. And those guys, I mean, you become a heat casualty. You're a heat casualty. You're going to be dealing with that for the rest of your life because you're going to be more susceptible to being a heat or a cold casualty as well. But those were the first guys that went down. The biggest, baddest looking dudes that you could ever imagine, they were the first to drop. And some of these smaller guys, and like I tell you, the guy who impressed me most, I mean, I can't to talk about it and then to see something like this happen doesn't do it justice. But to be able to run with a 70 to 80 pound ruck on your back and average 7 something a mile is unbelievable. He was under 8 minutes a mile every mile. I mean, it's just unreal how anybody could do that. So never judge a book by its cover. It's a mental thing. It's not made up. It wasn't made up of Supermen. It's made up of people who can endure, people who can put things, compartmentalize it, put it to the side, and just do it. Just get it done. And know that when you think it's over and you're starting to breathe a sigh of relief, you're going to have something thrown at you again, and it ain't over. And you're going to have to just do it. And you just get into that mentality. You're just going to push through. If you have that mentality and that never quit, and those are the people they want on these teams. They don't want what people refer to as the gazelles, okay? People that things come easy to, and they go out there and just do it, and they can run the sub 5 minute miles and with ease and all of that stuff. Because as soon as it gets hard for these people, if they've had everything easy their whole life because they're this naturally gifted athlete and all of this, they're going to quit as soon as something hard is thrown at them. They would rather have the person that buckles down and pushes through sheer determination and willpower That's the people that they want on a Special Forces A team. And that's the person that they want on a SEAL team. And that's the person they want on a MARSOC team or in Ranger Battalion or in PJs or whatever, okay?
Yep.
Because there's a bunch of really good special operations units out there. There's good infantry units. There's just good units out there, right? But the people they want for these are not Supermen like they've been played up in movies or anything. Supermen don't exist. They are people who, through sheer determination and willpower, don't give a shit. They are not going to quit. And that's what they want. And that's what they're looking for. So if you're looking, everything that's happened is depressing, okay? But if this is your dream, do it and make yourself the best you can possibly be. Get through it, be the best, set an example. We need good people in these units because the powers that be are trying to kill them. Don't let them do it. Don't let them do it, okay? They've lowered standards. They've done all of these other things. They're politically correct. They don't give a shit about the unit. They don't give a shit about the effectiveness of the unit. They don't give a shit about the country. They don't give a shit about the military. They don't. They give a shit about themselves and their career and what doing this will get them. So don't let these people win, okay? Deal with the shit sandwich they've given us on this. And I want to stress this. Rangers and SF and Force Recon, and we are not, it is not unique to that. This is going to happen. This is happening right now in every special operations unit that's out there. Nobody's immune from it. And it just hurts. And it hurts all the people that have served in these units going back to World War II. And it dishonors it, but don't let it. Be the best you can be. Don't let it discourage you. We need good people. We need good people in command. God knows we need good people in command. Okay? So this is more, we want this to be more of an uplifting message. As we go along, we're going to do, if people like these stories, we're going to talk more about the Q course as we go through it and some of the stories associated with us through the Q course. And the next one for me after this would be SOPSI 2, then Phase 2. Till then, Chris, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think people need, one of the questions people need to think about is this a type of guy that you want defending your country? Is this the type of guy you want defending you and your rights? And ask yourself that. And then when the question comes, to you personally, and it's to all Americans, that what are we going to do to save this type of warrior? Well, how are we going to save this type of warrior? And then you need to make a decision on that, because these tough men stand ready in the night to do harm onto those who would do us harm.
That's
okay?
right.
Just know that.
It sounds funny, but that's true. These people are willing to do what needs to be done for the benefit of this country, and they have been shafted by they're shafted because you lower the standards, and that puts them in jeopardy. Okay, that puts them in jeopardy. Somebody who can't get through, okay, these events, and they have to make different things and pave waves and pave the way, and then lower the standard or eliminate standards altogether. That made something that was a real accomplishment for a very small few people that could get through it, okay, and that chose to get themselves through it. It destroys all of it, and it destroys the unit. So when you hear this political correct nonsense being thrown about out there by politicians and the news media, these people are not who you should be listening to. They are full of shit, and they are in it for themselves. The people that have done this, that can give you the straight and skinny on it, they're who you should be listening to as well. And everybody has different opinions on things. These are Chris and mine opinions. And we're not saying that we know all the answers. We certainly don't know all the answers. But I do know that if they are going to push forward with this, they need to put standards back. And if a woman can get through those standards, right, If a woman can get through it, so be it at that stage, okay? You do not eliminate standards to increase. They told us this throughout the whole Q course. You cannot mass produce a Green Beret. Cannot do it. Well, this is what they're doing right now. And they're doing it in the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Army. They're doing it across the board. And really, the forces that are behind this are not for, improving our defensive capabilities or improving our country. It's to tear us down. And they've got their lackeys in power that can do this stuff. You need to write Congressman. You need to put the standards back, put the STAR course back, put the PT standards back to where they were. Okay, put all of the events back into Team Week. Put all of the events into Phase 2. Meet the standard. If you can't meet the standard, do not change the standard. And what they're out there lying, saying we haven't lowered the standards, we just changed them. They've lowered or eliminated them. Language has been taken out of the Q course. STAR course, you don't have to pass it. PT test, you fail a PT, not max. You fail a PT test, you get to come back. You quit selection, they invite you back. This is so foreign to Chris and I, and this is why we spent so much time on this. But at the same time, don't let them win, okay? These are the rules that they put out there, and this is what they've done. Don't let them win. If you want to go and get into any one of these units, do it and make the unit better, okay? Worry about yourself, then worry about your team, okay? Make the unit better. And then maybe you can get to a position where you have some clout and can affect the unit in a more positive way as a commander. But right now, what we can do is what we can do. We have to deal with the shit sandwich they've given us, and we also can contact our representatives and say this needs to be addressed. All right.
All right.
Well,
yeah, I'm froze up again, man. So
yep, I see you.
Yeah.
So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask us questions. We do offer a military readiness program that's not just designed for special operations. It's designed to make you successful in the military, whatever that MOS may be. So if you're interested, check out our website, www.panergiclife. And remember, live in freedom every day. Stay positive. We're going to get through this. Don't turn on each other. Be a good teammate and keep moving forward. You're Americans.
Live in freedom every day. We'll see you guys next time.